Hi everyone, hope you're all well. Just gonna wait a couple more seconds just to allow people to get logged in. Okay, people are slowly joining us. See some hands being raised, thank you. Okay, so we'll make a start. So firstly, welcome to everybody who's joined us. Thank you for taking the time to come and sit with us this afternoon. So hope you're all keeping well, first and foremost. And just a couple of things, as we're going through the slides, there are going to be options at the end for you to raise any questions that you may have. So if I can just ask, there should be a bar along the bottom that's got questions and answers. If you have got anything that you want to ask, then by all means, pop it in there. And we've set some time aside at the end to go through that. So what we're going to be covering today, so getting back to business safely. So for those of you who may not know me, I am relatively new to the health and safety team at ATG. So I'm Ashley Burgess and I'm one of the health and safety consultants. I've worked in health and safety now since 2005, predominantly in construction and engineering management. And then I made the move over to consultancy around 4 years ago, joining ATG in February of this year. For those of you that might not be familiar with ATG and what we do, so we're a health and safety consultancy, and we offer a broad range of health and safety services. We've got a team, we've got a broad knowledge base, so that can go across many industry sectors. And we can also tailor that to best suit your business in how we sort of implement that and how we help you establish what your health and safety needs are. We also have accredited training courses that we provide. So such things as the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or IOSH as you might know it. We offer the Managing and Directing Safely courses. And we also have e-learning packages and facilities available that we can assist you in getting your training provided to your staff. If that is anything that anybody's interested in, by all means, give us a shout. But hopefully now you should all be able to see the screen. You should be able to see the slides that are coming up. So we've already had a couple of webinars that have covered topics previously that some of you may have been involved with, covering things for helping businesses get back to work safely. We've also issued out some of our own documents that we've been working on alongside clients to help get things established so that when you do go back to work, it makes that transition just that bit smoother. We've got email updates that we're sending out regularly. We've got a toolkit, again, with plenty of documentation within that. And we've also got a home worker portal for anybody that they may wish to use it to help them to manage remote staff that they have working. We've also got webinars going on throughout, so by all means get registered on our website and there's more to come. And we've also got a question and answers tomorrow, which I'll be doing along with two of our employment law experts. So that's at 12 o'clock tomorrow. So if anybody wants to join in, then feel free. But we shall make a start. So let's look at what we're going to cover today. So we're going to be covering returning to work after the lockdown. What things we're going to be covering in terms of business and building considerations following reopening of premises that may have been closed for some time. We're going to also touch on risk assessments and preparing you to get back to business across various industry sectors. We're going to be looking at maintenance of health and safety and your competency and accreditations. And then also we're going to look at e-learning and safety courses and site inductions. So we've sort of worked closely with clients and tried to break this down following on from government's recent updates, more businesses are able to operate again. So with that in mind, we've been working closely to get COVID-19 toolkits created. That includes a template risk assessment, return to work checklists, employee declaration forms, guidance for contractors, things along those lines, just to make that process that bit easier for you, so you can just go back to work and get doing what you need to be doing. We've split it down and we've put it into 5 steps. So the first step, or the first consideration, you need to sort of think about what measures you're going to need to implement across your employees, your visitors, and any contractors, so that once you're returning to your site or your operation, that it's safe to do so. And we always say the best way to do this is to start off with your risk assessment. Now, this process, regardless of it being COVID-19 related, it's always more effective when you can involve staff in it, because it allows them to have their say in the process. And as well, it can help you understand it that bit better when you're providing advice, because they might be more familiar with the day-to-day working process. Not only will it help you meet your legal obligations as well as an employer, but we need to bear in mind that, you know, staff might be feeling nervous about returning to work. So this will just help to evidence the safeguarding measures that you're putting in place for them. And we'll look at the risk assessment in more detail further down the slides, but as part of the risk assessment, you need to consider the actual premises, especially if they've been closed for some time during lockdown. You know, buildings, when they've been unoccupied for some time, it's a good idea to start by checking for signs of damage, things like vandalism around the building or any outside spaces, and just checking, you know, that there's not been any unauthorised access, or if there's been any rough sleepers or teenagers on the site. So things like a deep clean or repairing those before you get operational may need to be considered in before you get your contractors around. Things will also apply like this to like your fire systems and life preserving measures that you've got within the premises. So you need to make sure that those are still in working order, and any arrangements regarding emergency evacuations are still suitable. Again, this may require a contractor or like a service engineer for your fire alarms. So we just need to make sure that you're still fulfilling your statutory obligations when you're planning in your reopening dates. Again, this will also factor in any other sort of things that you've got in place, like air conditioning units or any ventilation units. You may need to consider repairs to any sort of gas systems before you operate. And another one is Legionella. So as an employer or a person in control of the premises, you're responsible for ensuring risks to Legionella are reduced. So that be done usually through doing a risk assessment, and you also need to understand what water system you have in place. So it's essential that when you reopen, following the lifting of these restrictions, that a water system is not just simply put back into use. Water systems that have been left for a period of time, as you probably are aware, they become stagnant, and then that can expose our employees to Legionella. So when you're planning to go back to work, it's always good to think about having a safe startup. You know, if you have evaporative cooling systems, then you should follow the arrangements that you already have in place. But things like simple mains fed systems, they should be purged, which means flushing them through to remove any water, and just making sure that anything that's been sat in the pipes whilst you've been closed is flushed through for 10 to 20 seconds. Larger water systems, such as cold water tanks, they may need to be chemically cleaned. So hot water generators should be thermally cleaned and a full system flushed. Once they're back in operation, they should be sampled 2 to 7 days after disinfection. But for larger water systems that haven't been operational for a while, it's probably wise that they're going to need disinfecting by a specialist water treatment company. So all these are just things to consider when you're considering your arrangements for contractors and things that may have an impact if you are looking to get back to business quickly. So the next step is communicating with employees and how you're going to prepare them for returning to work. So as we know, guidance from the government has expressed that if you can work from home, then you should still continue to do so. But where it's not possible, then we should start to consider your business needs, what they are, and how you're going to bring back those employees safely. So this may involve a phased return. So you need to decide who's going to be returning to work first. That might be senior managers, and then you may follow that with line managers and employees second. You need to assess if any employees that you are looking to return, if they're vulnerable, or if they're living with extremely vulnerable people who may be shielding. You need to also plan and keep it documented down so that it's easy to understand. You need to be able to evidence that and that it's been communicated to all employees. Also as well, if you've got employees that are unable to return because they're self-isolating or they may be shielding, then it's always good. We need to remember that we need to keep the health and well-being of employees too through this. So it's good to just have a friendly and approachable communication system. That way it just encourages employees to report any areas that they feel are not working effectively. And also you just need to make sure that you've got a clear reporting procedure. So do we have a response plan if any employees, when we do come back, if they come back and say that they've recognised COVID-19 systems, do we have forms and procedures in place to assist us with that? So those are all things that we've been looking to create as part of our COVID-19 toolkit. So step 3, the way you're sort of going to go about this and make sure that we're doing all that we can and following what government guidance is telling us is the social distancing measures. And as you know, the government's instructed that you stay 2 meters away from people that are outside of your household. So this obviously includes when we're in the workplace. So ways in which we can do that is to avoid meetings where we can, avoid the need for groups of people to be gathered so that you can conduct meetings virtually, something similar to what we're doing now or over the phone. And then also things like staggering start times, shift patterns, can we change those and making breaks at different times so that we're not creating crowds within the workplace. Things like restricting customer and visitor access to site. So are you going to limit that to just essential visitors? A one-in, one-out policy if you have customer facing. Also, can we rearrange seating and desk arrangements so that the 2 meter distances can be implemented? Can we send paperwork electronically rather than handling hard copies? And things, if you are having cash payments, can you make those so that they're contactless, or are you using card terminals, or are you doing it through online banking rather than having to handle physical cash? As we touched upon, public-facing employees, you might have additional controls in place like the clear plastic screens at contact points, and you may then also incorporate this into your cleaning schedules that you're probably going to ramp up, making sure that we're cleaning and disinfecting in those areas more. Entries into the premises, such as one in, one out, if you're getting customers that are coming onto site quite a lot. And also it's advisable to have the 2 meter markings on the floor with signage up so that they know the process. So controlling visitor access, it brings us into, whilst we're ensuring the safety of our employees, are we going to limit the amount of visitors and contractors that we have coming to our site? So that might include delivery drivers, transport companies collecting goods. You may have contractors that need to come on site to complete repairs like we touched about initially, servicing like thorough examinations, things like your forklift trucks. We need to sort of factor in how we're going to manage our contractors coming onto site and any public that are coming into contact with us. So additional controls for that may be drop-off and collection points with heightened safety measures for your staff that are working in that area, giving them regular cleaning or disinfecting, or having wipes that are available to wipe surfaces down. And if it's possible, it's good that if you can have a separate entrance and exit for staff to prevent that cross-contamination. Okay, so step 5 in the process focuses more around your hygiene arrangements. So by keeping high levels of hygiene within your business, this is going to really help to minimise the spread of COVID-19. So things like assessing high contact services like door handles, any kitchen equipment and welfare facilities, these are going to help you identify where deep cleans are required and where they're required more frequently. Having disinfectant sprays and wipes put in notable places around the premises like at entrances and exit points, in kitchen areas, offices, anywhere where there's customer interaction points and drop-off and collection points. You also need to sort of make considerations around, if you can, removing shared tools and equipment, like personal tools, if they can be issued instead, then great. Employees that are working from desks, implementing a clean desk policy so that they are aware that they're responsible for making sure their own equipment is kept clean and just policing that going forwards. And as well as enforcing the 2-metre distance rule, like within canteens and rest areas, it might also be a control that you put in place so that single-use things like cups and plates and utensils, so that you're not having that sharing of equipment, so you're minimising that cross-contamination again. And also making sure that employees are responsible for their own cups, plates, cutlery, anything that they're using, and instructing them to wash, immediately after use. For workstations and equipment where you can't make it single use, like things like machinery, then it's hard to enforce that you're only going to have one person using it. So then you may look to up your cleaning regimes. Forklift trucks, for example, if you've got staff that are using them throughout the day that are different, you might have facilities on there like disinfectant wipes or cleaning products, so that then they can clean once they start to use it, and when they've finished. It's always good as well to have hand sanitizer if that's available. But as well as hygiene of the premises, we also need to make sure that we are covering arrangements surrounding staff hygiene. So it's important to remind employees to maintain high levels of personal hygiene to help reduce that risk of spreading. There's handy posters from the NHS, they refer to the catch it, bin it, kill it, like we can see. And having these up around the workplace, they're going to remind employees to ensure that any sneezes are caught in a tissue, they're disposed of immediately, and then also reminding them that hands should be washed straight away. There's posters online that you can pop up around again with regarding hand washing techniques, and all these can be downloaded and used and put in as controls within your risk assessment. So, like we talked about with regards to your risk assessment, government guidance has, on the 10th of May, as it was updated from the Prime Minister, as we mentioned, has said anybody who can work from home should be encouraged to do so. But now for businesses that are returning, it's fundamental that they have a risk assessment in place and they're following the sector-specific guidance to make sure that they're covering anything that is safety related in their areas. So there's 8 sets of guidance now that's covering construction and outdoor work, factories, plants and warehouse, and working in people's homes, labs and research facilities, offices and contact centres, restaurants that are offering takeaway or delivery and shops, things like that, and working with vehicles. But the main point to focus around with regards to the risk assessment is that employees now, it's reasonably foreseeable, and therefore as part of an employee's general duties, they need to carry out an appropriate COVID-19 risk assessment. So like I mentioned, we have templates available for these that we've issued to clients, but they need to make sure that the risk assessment recognises the virus as a hazard. It needs to be able to reflect that it can be spread via coughing, sneezing, talking and breathing, and that it can be transferred from the hands onto other surfaces. It's also noted that it can survive on surfaces even after transfer. So we need to make sure that the risk assessment conveys that if it's passed from one person to another. Whilst many might survive infection, and we don't want to be going around trying to scare everyone, but there is a potential that some that contract it may die, so therefore it's regarded as a high risk hazard. So we need to then look at what the likelihood of our employees contracting it and the exposure considerations that we need to factor in. So touching again on things like employees who go to meet with people that may be carrying the disease, how frequently will they meet and how long will it be? Do employees travel to and from work, and does this expose them to public crowds? Do we know which employees are medically, they're more vulnerable and it makes them more susceptible? And how do we record this information? Do we know employees that may have people in their households who have increased exposure, or they may have people that are shielding? And also noting that if somebody comes to us and there's somebody who's isolating, what measures we're going to put in place to react to that. Employees who are meeting people and getting exposed to it, is there any way we can minimise that by reducing working confined spaces, for example? If we're working in sort of well ventilated and outside, can we put more measures in place for that? And then once you have these questions, the answers to these questions, you can start to think about how you can reduce the risk and what control measures you're going to put in place to help protect employees from the virus. So when we complete a risk assessment, we consider the hierarchy of control, which many of you may be familiar with. And this just assists you as a business. It helps you to decide what is reasonable to control the hazard. So if we take a look, firstly, elimination. Can we eliminate the virus? Well, unfortunately not until we get a vaccine. That's not something that an organisation can do. Next one down is substitution. Can we substitute it for something less harmful? Again, unfortunately, the answer is no, we cannot. So the next control is engineering controls. So this means something you can have in place that's going to reduce the transmission of the virus between employees. Things that we've touched upon, like having the physical barriers, customer screens, if we're minimising the amount of employees that are customer facing at one point. And there are some studies that have found if ventilation's good, it can help to minimise that spread if the virus becomes airborne. So the next control, and probably the best options for most organisations, is going to be your administrative controls. So these are things that you can provide to employees, like your procedures, or things you're going to have in place to help protect them. Things again, like we've covered, social distancing, increased cleaning, and also your risk assessment must consider and show how you're going to keep the workplace and the equipment clean. You know, have you adjusted your working practices, and how you're going to ensure people are safe while still operating. So when you're doing your risk assessment, you also need to think about how you're going to communicate it to any contractors that may be coming onto site, and how you're going to manage staff if they're working on someone else's premises. So the last sort of step in the hierarchy of risk is always personal protective equipment. And it's always the last resort. We say that because you want to be looking to see if you can remove the hazard first or make it less hazardous. It's also one of the weakest controls because it does rely heavily on employees using it correctly. And there are lots of things which can affect its performance, like if it's the right specification, if it's kept clean, if employees know how to store it correctly, and if you're going to have stock availability. So there's been a lot of discussion around PPE in the media, but the government website is still instructing that PPE around COVID-19 should be focused on NHS, medical and care environments, not the normal workplace. However, if you conduct your risk assessment and you decide that PPE is a requirement, then you need to make sure that staff are aware of the correct way to use it, the correct way to wear it, and that they understand properly its effectiveness and the needs to keep it clean. We shouldn't be putting PPE as a substitute for hand washing and personal hygiene levels, but for any guidance that you do need with regards to wearing masks correctly, then the HSE have guidance on this on their website. Another thing to remember as well is, whilst you're returning to work, it's important not to lose sight of your normal health and safety risks, the things that you would still be doing day in, day out if you were still operating. It's important to make sure that you still have those effective controls within your workplace. A lot of employees have faced issues that I know clients that I've been speaking to, that training is due to expire, or that they're coming up to renewal. But a lot of training providers, if you go onto their website, they're providing e-learning now for new and renewal applications. And where training has expired, they are extending those. But you just need to consider the risk and the competency of the employee just to determine whether the controls in place are still suitable. If you fall behind as well with any routine health and safety arrangements, it might make it really difficult when you're coming up to doing your renewal of your accreditations like CHAS and Safe Contractor. It just means you've got more work to make sure that paperwork is in order before you do the renewal or the submission. But a great tool for you to be able to demonstrate and show your training and instruction to employees is around e-learning, and it's really useful for communicating your procedures remotely. Like, things like this are great. It's really quick. It gives you a foresight into who's actually received the training, and it shows that it's been understood by the employees. It's really useful, if they're coming back and you're doing a staggered return, it just sort of minimises that need for contact with others. We have e-learning modules available for you to use. We've got guidance and training for employees on returning to work. And we've also been working to create a library of forms and documents that are going to ease and assist you with this process. But once staff do start to come back to work, it's important that you communicate any changes, and any documents that employees receive, it's noted down that they've had that information. This may mean as well, if you're going out to site, that re-inductions need to be done, and you need to be considering the health and safety arrangements or procedures of what other companies may have for sites that you're going on to. So we'll get to questions. Let's have a look. So I've got a question from an anonymous attendee. Do you have an example of a clean desk and self-sanitizing policy that you can share? Yes, we do. There's loads of documents that we're developing daily that we can get across to you. So by all means, we're going to send links and things after this, so you can come back to me and I can certainly assist you with that. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't think we've got many questions on that. Has anybody got anything else that they're wanting to ask? Okay. Will the risk assessment template be shared? Yeah, I think that is readily available. I think our COVID-19 toolkit is in the process of being distributed, but after we finish this, I'll check what the arrangements are with that. You'll get a link with my details, so I can certainly get that to you. Okay, so a good question from Jason. What about face masks if you have a beard? So if we're taking it back to what the face mask is used for, if it's PPE for processes with regards to dust and things, then you definitely have to have the face fit testing. But if it's just surgical masks that people are looking to implement as part of the COVID-19 arrangements, then there's nothing to say that they have to be face fit tested. They're just the ones that fit over your ears. And they are only as a preventative measure. If you're carrying the virus, it just helps you spread it to other people. It's not going to prevent you from catching anything. Any more questions? Oh, Jane, how would we manage common equipment such as kettles, coffee machines? Would this be managed with hand washing, sanitizing, signage, etc.? So yeah, I think a lot of clients that I've been speaking with, they've still got the canteens and things available for employees to use, rightly so, when they're on shift and they're going to sort of have a break. But it may just be that as part of your cleaning schedules, you are ramping that up, just making sure that we have, more rigorous instructions in place. We're not just leaving it down to one person to make sure that they're cleaning it after they've used it and things. Yep, so anonymous attendee, are previous webinars available to view the recordings? Yes, we do. So we have a link on our website. So again, at the end of this, you should receive an email with the details, but I'll make sure that we get that to you. How often will the webinar be repeated? We've got webinars coming up all through. So if you keep checking on our website, the regular updates on there, but you can sign up for our sort of newsletters, so you'll be given information with regards to webinars that are upcoming within those, part of our marketing. So Malcolm Woods has asked, if the 2 metre rule for contractors can't be maintained, is it okay to wear masks for short duration? So yeah, the government website is saying if you can't maintain the 2 metre social distances and it's a high volume area, then you should be looking for considerations of masks. But I'd always look from your risk assessment to see whether can we still be operating safely if we're not maintaining that 2 metre rule. So if that's contractors going out onto site, it's seeing what arrangements for those are in place, if we can stagger it when we're working. But it would all fundamentally come back down to that assessment of the risk. So Jack, I work in a college. Would it be unreasonable to ask for separate water closets for staff and students? I wouldn't say that it's unreasonable, it's whether it's going to be practicable. So is there going to be the facilities available to do that? If yes, then I see no reason why not. You're minimising the amount of your staff that are coming into contact with members of the public. But if that's not possible, then we just need to make sure that from our risk assessment, we are making sure we're upping our cleaning arrangements and making sure that we are, we're covering to cover the amount of people that are going to be coming in and out. Okay. Jason, so if in an office environment you can't maintain 2 metre rules such as corridors, is the contact time to be considered as a reasonable measure? So yes, so in terms of corridors and where you've got people that are going to be passing frequently, is there is there an option that you could have a one-way system? I know that's not always going to be reasonable in smaller office environments, but if you are sort of doing a phased return back and sort of managing the amount of staff that you're going to be having in one time, you know, you could consider that a reasonable measure would be the exposure time. It's just trying to keep that 2 metre distance where you can. Jason Anderson, how would we tackle an employee who thought the measures we have in place are not good enough, so they didn't want to attend work, even if they adhere to government guidelines? Jason, that's a really good question. And I think that'll be a good one for tomorrow, because I think this is going to border onto employment law as well. So our employment law experts will be able to give you definitive advice on that. But in terms of coming from Health and Safety at Work Act, if Section 7, an employee's responsible for making sure that they're safe and others around them, they'd have to have a good reasoning as to why they don't feel it's safe. And if you can evidence that through your risk assessments and your processes and your procedures, then I would really be looking to speak to an employment advisor just to see what their take is on it. That's it. I don't know if we've got any more. But yeah, if anybody does have any more questions or you need any more advice, please feel free. You should be getting my details at the end of this, so you can always contact myself. And the question and answers that we have tomorrow, I think that's going to be really good, because it's going to cover a two-pronged attack from employment law and from health and safety. So a good one for you, Jason. See if we've got any more. Okay, so we've got one regarding anonymous attendee, thank you. If the job role involves a member of staff going into a member of the public's household, 2 meters social distancing may not be possible. Would it be the employer's responsibility to provide masks, gloves, hand sanitizers? Okay, so like we were mentioning, I'd always make PPE the last form of defence. I know that people may be thinking, you know, they feel safer with it on, so each to their own. But with regards to if you're going into people's premises, so like tradesmen, electricians, things like that, what I've been advising clients is to provide that information to their customers beforehand. You know, is there arrangements that we can put in place to make sure that they're vacated? You know, they let them in, they allow them to the area, they carry out their works, and sort of any need for them to come in is restricted. But if then you determine that because you're going to be in an area where you can't do that, then yeah, it would be the employer's responsibility to provide any PPE that you deem fit. So that might be, you know, cleaning arrangements like you mentioned, hand sanitizer, gloves. But I'd always have that as your last resort if you can. If a company does not have adequate processes in place, what could the consequences be? So the two main legal bits that this comes under would be the Health and Safety at Work Act and the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations. So because this is a foreseeable risk, companies do need to make sure that they've done everything that they've seen as reasonably practicable, or they've done everything within their power to make sure that they are operating safely. And as long as you can demonstrate that through your processes and your procedures, then you should be fine. But it is worth noting that the HSE have said that they're going to be, you know, doing more investigations within to the COVID-19 as part of their 14 million boost that they've had. So we've got one from Alex. What would be the case for 2 persons in a van? So there is government guidance on this, people that are in vehicles. And if you sort of can't maintain that people are going to be travelling separately, then if you've got 2 people, it's sat opposite each other. They advise you to sort of face away from each other, opening windows and keeping ventilation. And also, if possible, a control measure may be that you're keeping the same gangs together or the same groups together so that you're not having that cross-contamination, and cleaning procedures again. So every time that you're leaving the van or someone new is coming into it, you're disinfecting and wiping down steering wheels, handles, things of that nature. Okay, so John, any ideas for handling the hygiene of keypad entries to shared office buildings? That's a great one. I know I've had a few clients that have clocking in machines and they're using the thumb. All we can try and do is just identify it as a high contact point and making sure that, you know, we're cleaning before and after we use it. That may fall under your procedure when staff are entering the building, you know, as once they have used the keypad and they're getting in, they're washing their hands as they then go into the building. Likewise, once they've used the keypad and they're leaving, you may have that they have their own like smaller hand sanitizers on them. It would all come down to your processes and your risk assessments. Okay, so Sarah, you've mentioned frequent cleaning regimes with regards to deep cleaning. What frequency to deep clean an office space would you be recommending? Great question. So that would sort of be determined on how many staff you've got in that office, how often you're in there. If you're sort of working 9 to 5 and it's relatively full, then you might be looking to do deep cleans on a daily basis. You may even ramp that up to more frequently. It would just sort of depend on if you're going to have employees with their own cleaning regime. So like we mentioned in the slides, they're responsible for cleaning their space. But things like canteens and, you know, more frequently used areas, I'd try to minimise the sort of how often those are being used, but there may be areas where you may wish to get cleaning regimes ramped up. So there's no definitive sort of time scale, but it would sort of come down to how often and how frequently it's being used. See if we've got any more. Yeah, I think we've covered most of them. If anybody's got any more, by all means, I'll hang on. So I'm just having a quick look on the chat. I know we were going through the questions and answers, but we're just having a look with regards to how would you suggest keeping the number of users of the toilets at any one time? It's a really difficult one because you don't want to be sort of going totalitarian and telling people when they can use the toilet. But, you know, companies that I've been working with, they have adopted that there's only 3 people in at a time. You know, if you're staggering shift breaks and things like that, so you can make it so that they're more frequent throughout, you may be able to minimise that by how many people are going to be in any place at any one time. It is a difficult one, but as long as your cleaning arrangements are in place, you should be able to put reasonable controls in place with that. Let's just have a see if we've got any more in the chat. Yeah, the webinar is recorded, so you will be able to get that on our website. You will get a link for this at the end as well. Can we send templates for floor markings 2 metre rule, Glenn? Maybe ping me an email on that one. I'm not 100% whether you mean the actual distancing or a risk assessment to support that, but yeah, by all means, give me a shout and I can help. Would it be, oh, we've done that one, sorry. Would it be a good idea to have hand sanitizers on the outside of the entrance to the workplace as well as the exit? So Glenn, great question. I think it sort of touches on what we touched with before with the keypads. You know, if you've determined that people are going to be using them coming in and out, it is great if you can have that on the inside and the outside. Some clients that I've been going to, they've put procedures in place or sort of measures in place so that you don't have to pull the handles or touch the doors. You can grab them. They've put little sort of hooks on, but that's not going to be available for everyone. But as long as you're keeping your cleaning schedules up to date, then that should be fine. Okay. In an office environment, is it necessary to put floor markings down in addition to desk spacing? Yeah, I don't think that's going to be like high on the control measures. You know, it's good if you can do that. If you're going to have people that are coming in and you sort of having contact with each other regularly, and it's sort of being noted that people are struggling to keep the 2 metre distancing, then as an extra control measure, you may put that in or decide that people just need that visual, because it's human nature at the end of the day to go and interact with your colleagues. And sometimes it is difficult to remember you need to keep that distancing. So it's all about having those procedures in place, but also as well, making sure that they're working. So you don't want to just pay lip service to it. You want to make sure that what we're doing is effective. And if it's not, is there anything that we can do to further reinforce it? Yeah, I think. Is it wise doing temperature checks on staff entering the workplace? Good question, David. We've had this quite a bit recently. So there's nothing specific in the government guidance advising to do temperature checks. And it's a great question as well, I think, for tomorrow with the question and answers with the employment law experts, because I think whilst you might think that you're doing what is reasonable and it's an outward sign for you to show that you're doing what you need to, it's probably going to cause you more issues than it would solve, because government guidance tells us that, you know, it's not always a high temperature that people that are carrying the virus show, so it's not always a valid indicator. And as well, you need to sort of consider the impact that's going to have if you've got staff that are on shift. Are you going to have time each day to take the checks? And also the equipment that you're using, you know, are you going to use the laser one? I think it would just open a lot of issues with regards to it being sort of medically related, and it's, you know, under GDPR. I'd double check to make sure that you're not factoring anything in from an employment law aspect that's going to cause you grief down the line. So Debbie, do you need to clean the toilets after every use? Generally our own hygiene, we should be, when we're going to the toilets, we're washing our hands after we've finished. So it's just sort of being aware that, you know, if you're using the flush on the toilet or pressing it, you know, you might just keep a pack of hand sanitizer or wipes on the top so that you can just clean it down. Again, it's just sort of your cleaning schedules and what you deem to be suitable. If you've only got 3 staff in the office and the toilet's only getting used, you know, 3 times a day or whatever, then, you know, it might be a bit too much to go and clean it, somebody going in every time, or, but it's always good if you can clean down before and after use. Okay, what do we do if anxiety is preventing someone from returning to work? Do we advise them to call in sick? John, you have mentioned in it one for tomorrow, but yeah, I think that would be a really good one, because it does sort of come into both realms. You know, if you're doing all that's reasonable as an employer and you've got what you need in place, I think it's only right that, you know, a lot of people are anxious, or, you know, that they might be worried because of somebody that they're living with. You know, we don't want to be seen to be forcing anyone. We need to remember the well-being as part of Health and Safety at Work Act. And, you know, you want to be showing that you can support them. And I think with that approach, you're going to get more people that are willing to come back, rather than, and I'm not saying that you do that, John, but yeah, it would be really good for tomorrow, because they'll be able to give you their spin on it and what is considered reasonable if they then do refuse to come into work. Okay, so in our sector, Margaret, you've mentioned that you've talked around split shift systems to reduce cross contamination, also protects workforce if one shift gets affected and has to shut down. Yeah, so it is a good one. You know, as part of what I've been sort of advising clients on is, you know, we might be really good in sort of advising on the symptoms of it or what we're going to do to try and prevent it, but we also need to be mindful of what we're going to do if we come to that point. You know, is there someone on the shift, like you mentioned, that has been affected? Do we shut down then? Do we have a response plan? You know, are we going to have a deep clean of that area? Are we going to maybe make those staff, you know, assess whether they've had any symptoms or self-isolating? Might be another good one, Margaret. You know, I know you've mentioned that you're already doing that, but it might be good listening in tomorrow just to see what employment law says regarding if you need to get staff to go off. Okay, so what if an employee says they need to stay off until kids return to school on furlough, anonymous attendee? So yeah, that would be a great one for tomorrow. So unless it's health and safety related, why they're refusing to come back, then I'd definitely speak to one of our employment law experts, and they'll be able to tell you, you know, what is deemed reasonable in that sense. I think we're good. I think, Jason, we covered your one, didn't we? The 2-metre rule on corridors can't be adhered to. Again, just monitoring staff and who we've got in there. I think that may be it. David Foley, can you send the link out for tomorrow's webinar? Certainly can. I'll make sure that gets popped out to you. You get to see me again. Unlucky. But I don't know if anybody has any other questions, or if you do and you think of something, then by all means, like I said, I am on tomorrow, so you can go away tonight and have a good think and come at me with your worst questions. But yeah, it's been lovely speaking to you all. I hope you all stay safe. And if you do need anything, you'll get my details. So by all means, feel free to give me a shout. But take care and thank you very much.